На трибунах аллеют знамена, облака в поднебесье плывут. На зеленом ковре стадиона разноцветные майки цветут.
Hello and welcome back to the Russian Football News Podcast. We're recording and releasing earlier than scheduled this week, with the RPL games themselves brought forward to Thursday and Friday at the behest of one Valery Karpin in order to have some more training time in this Sbornaya squad in the upcoming international break. Thus, we're going to be discussing all the latest RPL action as Dynamo top the league for the first time in years, get all the latest lowdown on transfers, and start off with all the juicy information regarding the foreigner limit after the RPL clubs met in the week. To discuss that, I'm joined by Richard Pike.
Good evening, James. How are we all?
And David Sanson.
Good evening.
So I like to keep you on your toes and put you in different orders every now and again. But so, David, would you like to quickly go through and catch everyone up on what happened in the last week with the deadline and the meeting of the RPL clubs in regards to the foreigner limit?
Well, initially, I think the deadline. It was the deadline for the proposals, right? So the proposals were all submitted. There was various bits of information and leaks, and not many clubs made official statements on their position on the proposals. And a new deadline was announced by the RFU, which is the 31st of August, at which point we will know what the future is for the reforms for the league and the reforms for the league rules. The big exciting news one morning was we all got up and I think it was Meta Ratings had the break that the RFU were cancelling the limit. It was a bit of a presumptuous statement, but we're finally at a point where they are changing the limit again. Obviously, we had it a few years ago, and I say a few years ago, a couple of years ago now, and ended up actually being stricter. But it's getting there. We've got clubs in favour. We've got clubs against. We've got clubs who are mostly clubs who are indifferent. Clubs in favour of different things. Rubin, for example, are happy to completely forego the limit. A couple of the mid to big range clubs are happy to change the limit, but just ease the restrictions. Maybe 10 plus 15, for example. And then other clubs such as your Rostovs don't want to change the limit at all. But it seems like the most likely situation that's going to happen is the league will split into two parts. That seems like the proposal that people want and the clubs want. And it seems like the limit is probably, as much as we'd like it all to go permanently, I think it looks like it's probably going to go to 10 plus 15 would be my... If I was a betting man, that's where I'd put my money, although it'd be a tentative bet. I think that's pretty much where we are at the moment.
Yeah, and it was just literally, 3 hours ago that Match Premier themselves has released a grid on Twitter of the 16 clubs and where each of them stands in supporting the limit. And although there are different reasons behind where each club's position is, essentially, Dynamo, Zenit, Rubin, Sochi, CSKA, and Krasnodar would abolish. Arsenal, Akhmat, Nizhny, Spartak, and Rostov would support the proposals, but would negotiate a change in the proposals. Loko and Timki, I believe, declined to answer. Is that correct? And then Krylia, Ufa, and Ural all totally refused them in their entirety. So there is definitely room for manoeuvring and potentially getting rid of the limit, or at least unrestricting the limit in the very least. But it's quite funny looking at that grid because it's the most, to take it into a British context, it's the most like Brexit of the clubs who are denying it. And really not surprising in the least at all. But Richard, what's your take on this? Do you think that is it an inevitability that the limit would change if maybe not being abolished? And is that a good thing in the long term and short term?
Well, yeah, having looked at that at that match premiere diagram from earlier today, I have to say, with 6 of the 6 clubs that are in favour of the limit being removed, there's 6 clubs that I was definitely expecting to vote in favour of the limit being removed completely. The other 2, I was kind of expecting to go with them were Lokomotiv and Spartak. And obviously, at the minute, Spartak are in that position where they support changes but would negotiate it down, like you were saying, James. And Lokomotiv have yet to give us a full answer yet. They're sort of undecided yet. So yeah, like you said, it's been split very much down the lines I was expecting. Because at the minute, you've sort of got, like I would say in the league, a big 8 of Russian clubs, and they're obviously Zenit, CSKA, Spartak, Lokomotiv, Dynamo, Rubin, Sochi, and Krasnodar. They're the big 8 clubs in terms of wealth, stature, potential, stadium size, all that kind of thing. And a majority of them are in favour of cancelling the limit, and then obviously the other 8 clubs, a decent chunk of them are either, like I was saying, favour some kind of change but would negotiate, undecided, or completely against the limit. It's going to be a very interesting next few days, because obviously the vote's next Tuesday. I think it's the 31st of August where they're going to decide the very final vote as to how the structure is going to be from 2022-23 onwards. It's going to be a very few interesting few days of negotiations still. It does make you wonder whether some clubs might still break ranks yet. Obviously, we still have to know Himki and Lokomotiv's position. You'd expect they need a majority to vote in favour of it, any kind of changes. So I'm expecting it, if it's 9-7 in favour of abolishing the limit, then it probably will go. But just to see what would happen if it's split, if it's 8-8. Would they then have to maybe ask a second question, which could be, do you support keeping the limit the same as it is, or let's say making the limit less strict, like relaxing the limit a bit. And then if you go to relaxing the limit a bit, you put a few options on the table. You put 10 on the table, like David said, or you even put 12 or 14 on the table. The reason I'd say 12 or 14 should also be put on the table is that currently in the Turkish league, because they operate a foreign limit like the RPL, they're on 14 foreign players in the squad this season, and then next season it goes down to 12, and then the following season after that, 2023-24, it goes down to 10 in Turkey. I was looking at the structure the other day. So to me, you put those 3 options on the table, and then whichever one of those gets the most votes, if it goes that far, then that's what you go for the limit. But yeah, I think like David, I think my guess at the minute is that we might not get a full abolition, but I think we will get a relaxing of the limit. Personally speaking, I don't think 10 is enough. I think if it's going to be relaxed, it should be relaxed to 12 or 14. But yeah, should be an interesting few days of negotiations going forward. So we'll have to wait and see. But hopefully, fingers crossed, at minimum it goes to 12 or 14, but ideally removed. Hopefully there'll be a surprise, and a positive surprise from our end in the next few days.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. I think looking at the composition of which clubs voted for it and which clubs voted against, it's really not surprising that the majority of those who are impacted the most in terms of being able to play in the European competition, being able to have more financial clout, all almost unanimously vote in favour of. Of course, Sochi are the little ones of an outlier there. I mean, yes, they're in Europe. Yes, they have quite a bit of money, especially compared to some of the smaller teams like Ufa. They're not obviously nowhere near as big as the Dynamo, Zenit, Rubin, Krasnodar, or CSKA, even on their own. But they are, of course, big spenders who are also owned by the same owner as Dynamo. They Boris Rotenberg, essentially. So whatever Dynamo went with, Sochi were always going to go the same way. I mentioned it last week. I'm both surprised at Spartak as a club not supporting it right now, but the reasoning, well, it's not surprising. I expected Spartak should, but I expected exactly this because the owner's an absolute nutcase, and he would want changes to the proposal, because he wants part of his changes to be the future of the game. He always has done that. I remember when he had those rules that he set out a few years ago for where he thinks that Russian football should go in the future. And they weren't the worst ideas. I think one of them was batshit crazy, but like the rest of them were not like hugely detrimental or actually quite useful at times. But I think he even suggested in that a loosening of the restrictions upon the foreigner limit. But it's just more so the fact that he wants to drive change because he's a megalomaniac. He thinks of himself more than he thinks of the club. And that's kind of the way that he's run the club for the entirety of his tenure so far, which is highly dangerous. But I hope that they can come to a consensus. And it's the good thing is that Alexander Zhukov, who may still just be a mere functionary, but he's a far more experienced functionary and less corrupt than the man that he took over the job from. And he's obviously in charge of the RFU, and he's one of those driving for change. He is quite critical, considering he's the head of the RFU, of the foreigner limit in itself. He has mentioned that he's not quite sure if it's workable to change it, if there's the universal support would be there vociferously enough to be able to do so. But if the man at the very top of the circus is able to maybe invoke some of this influence elsewhere, even if it is upwards towards the man even higher than him, we all know who that is, then that can only help in the long term of getting rid of it. I must admit, I know what these people, these functionaries are like. I never expected it to go from 100 to 0. So at least going from what, as rumoured, 8 to 10 is better than nothing. But it's still not enough. And that's a case of the majority of structural issues behind the scenes that the RFU have been discussing and within Russian football. They do something, but it's never enough. It's what the restructuring of Match Premier and the restructuring of the TV money and getting in TV money from different countries. That's not necessarily their fault, because marketing a league is so difficult, and it's purely based on more external factors rather than internal. But it's still not quite enough. And that's been the case now for nigh on a decade, probably even longer, but those who are more experienced with football in the nation could speak on that far more expertly than we could. But David, do you want any last words on the foreigner limit, and aside from these potential structural changes at all?
I think just the one surprise for me was Rostov. I think you could include Rostov in as one of the big clubs. They've got a big following. They got a big stadium. They have previously spent big and sold big. Let's remember, and they've been in Europe. So I would put them in that top class, and a little surprised given their history of profit on foreign players. You know, they've sold foreign players for good profits in the past. Ingerson being one, Shmorodov being another one. Maybe Norman coming soon, and Hadzik Dunic in the future. Maybe future profitable sales. It's the model for a lot of clubs. You know, Russian players are very hard to sell on abroad at the moment. We'd obviously like to see that change. Obviously, it's going to have to start lower down. Players are going to have to, as the limit kicks in, players are going to be in less demand in Russia. They're going to have to go, and then the weaker players are going to have to go to your Polands, your Czech Republics, wherever. And then eventually the bigger players will follow. But with the lack of saleability of Russian players, it's always been the model for these clubs is, okay, we need to buy and sell foreign players, improve them, and make a profit. And for clubs like Rostov, who essentially have their model around that, and most of the mid-level clubs, Ural have previously said that was their model. Amka Perm did before they went bust as well, said, we want to get to this model. It's surprised that they've turned down that opportunity.
Yeah, it is a surprise. And Rostov aren't like Sochi, where Sochi are obviously a very young club. They've only existed for 3-4 years now, whatever it is. They are were founded in 1930s, pre-World War II, and while during the Soviet era were not particularly successful, I don't think they ever made it into the Vysshaya League. They only made it into Class A in general, only like a couple of occasions in the mid 60s and 70s. But it was even, I think the highest I ever got to was the Vitoria, not even the second of the first division. It spent most of the history dotting around Group B, Class B. Of course, that was because the other famous Rostov team, Rostov-on-Don, Nadonu, famous for Victor Ponedelnik, is a totally different entity, totally different football club. It was a little bit like Krasnodar to Kuban. They only really became successful after the fall of the Soviet Union. But looking at their history from then, they are by far one of the biggest clubs in the league in terms of fan base, by far one of the most successful since their relegation in 1993, early 90s anyway, it doesn't matter. But in terms of the size, you would expect them to support this. You would see that they can, with the new stadium, with the increased funding behind the scenes from the ownership group that took place in the last couple of years, that they would support it. But I think you were spot on earlier in saying it's literally coming from Xiaomin and the influence that he'll have at the place, the influence he has anyway. And he's been a vocal critic of loosening the limit in the past. So it's not surprising in the least in terms of Xiaomin. But I'm surprised that Artunians lets him have so much power, because Artunians himself, like I said, has actually been critical of the foreigner limit. Loko, why I think that they have as abstained, I believe, or why they're not giving enough information yet, is because of Leonchenko, one of the directors. He's the general director, I believe, at the club now, and I mentioned it pre-pod to the guys, but he was one of those who was involved in that Wagner Love racism debacle during the CSKA Loko derby, and when he was the head of the Russian Players Football Union, the players union, basically. So imagine being involved in a racist incident, or allegedly involved, sorry, it was never proven, allegedly involved in a racist incident when he was the head of the players union, an incident involving a player. So I'll not say much more on that, because we might get in trouble, but I think you could probably read between the lines, to be frank. But we'll move on now from structural issues, because to be honest, it's all a little bit up in the air still, and it is pure speculation at this point, and rumours and educated guesses that you get drip fed from different sources and following some more that are reliable journalists out there. And we will move on to transfer speculation, both in terms of what's been revealed exclusively by RFN ourselves of late, and by other reporters and news in general. So, Richard, would you like to kick it off with the latest in the Sardar Azmoun, Zenit and Claudinho transfer news?
Well, obviously, Claudinho debuted for Zenit last weekend against Ufa. I thought he showed some nice touches in the first half of the game. Faded a little bit in the second half, a little bit like Zenit themselves, I think. Obviously, the game finished 1-1. We'll get onto that a bit later. But yeah, Claudinho showed some nice touches on debut. There was one particular incident where he was right by the touchline and he nutmegged an Ufa defender, and then did a brilliant run into the opposition's final third. Laid a pass to Zuba. Zuba used his strength to hold it up, and then Claudinho took it off him, and then he drew a foul from one of the Ufa players. There was a couple of really nice touches. He seemed to play, in the wide area, in a playmaking role, slotting balls through, a couple of dribbling runs. I enjoyed his performance. Like I say, he faded a bit second half, but I think the whole Zenit team did. But yeah, he has now debuted for Zenit, and I'm happy to see them integrating him quick. They need to, because their Champions League campaign's coming up soon. The Sardar Azmoun chat's interesting. I think we got wind last night, didn't we, of Olympique Lyonnais in France's Liga have made an €11 million bid for Azmoun. The Azmoun situation is an interesting one, isn't it? Because Zenit can't really leave getting a replacement if Azmoun goes too late, because obviously the window, it will probably shut on the last day of August, which will be the 30th, next Tuesday. Interesting, on the same day that the future structure of the league is decided. But obviously that date is when players are away on international duty, and deadline day on international duty, when players are being called up left, right, and centre for internationals, is quite a difficult thing to do. So to me, with Zenit right now, I think if anybody is going to buy Azmoun from them, I think Zenit have got to set a deadline of Sunday. And I think if that deadline is not met, then he's going to have to stay at Zenit, because they're going to have to source a replacement if they sell him. I think Zenit have left themselves in a bit of a difficult situation too with the price, because obviously 11 million is, I think, low for for a player of Azmoun's potential ability. I think he's definitely got the ability to play in the top 5 league. But obviously the reason why Lyon's bid is 11 million is, and I understand it, is because he's in the last year of his contract at Zenit. And I think 11 million mark is around what Zenit paid for him. It might have been a bit less or around that, I think. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, Zenit have left themselves in a bit of a sticky situation here. And I don't even think they can ask for that much, because if he doesn't leave this window, I really think they're going to be struggling to get him onto a new contract, because Azmoun then would have the power to basically leave on a free next summer. So it's going to be an interesting development. It'll be interesting to see if any other clubs enter the fray for Azmoun. I certainly think anything around 15, 20 million, Zenit might well have to consider doing business, because ultimately, with 1 year left on his contract, and potentially might not renew, at 26, this is probably one of his last chances to get to one of the big 5 Western European leagues. So it's going to be interesting developments, but I would definitely set a deadline from Zenit that this has to be done by Sunday, because they don't want to be dashing around at the last minute trying to find a replacement. But yeah, should be intriguing to see what goes on in the next few days.
Yeah, I think the biggest spanner in the works is the fact that he is in the last year of his contract, and there's been obviously clubs sniffing around for quite some time now. I think Azmoun's been linked with moves abroad for as long as I can bloody remember. But if I remember rightly, wasn't it 12 million that Zenit got him for? I don't know if I've got that figure accurate. Obviously, it was quite a while ago now.
I think it was 10 plus bonuses was what Ruben
had
agreed. And we got
minimal profit.
When they won the league, I think Ruben got some bonuses.
Was it? Oh, yeah. Of course. The defender was 12 million, literally in the same window. David, what do you think? Do you think this will be Azmoun's last window in Russia, or potentially the winter transfer window is when he could move off with even less time on his contract?
Well, I hope it's his last. Not for not to devalue Zenit, but I've personally been watching Azmoun for 9 years now, since he was 17 when he first joined Rubin. And yeah, as you say, he's been linked with moves away since he was about 18, 19. Arsenal scouted him very early on when he was still at Rubin, I remember, when they were training near to us. So yeah, I think he's done his time. He's put in the hard work at 3 clubs in Russia. He's done very well. He'll go down and probably as one of the greatest strikers in the RPL certainly of the century, you would imagine. He's right up there, and he deserves that chance to go to a bigger league and do it and show what he can do. So yeah, I'm hoping that he gets his move.
Yeah, me too. It would be good. It's another one of those where it would be a shame to see the back of him and watch him week in, week out, but it can only be good for the RPL in the long term, that the other teams can see these players going abroad and being a success, and just creates it more of a generous and attractive marketplace for the bigger leagues. David, I'll come straight back to yourself. What's the latest on the Kavica rumours after some developments earlier on today?
Well, you'll see he's been injured for the last week or so, missed the last 2 fixtures. There was a period there where they thought he was going to stay. Obviously, Rubin are pretty stacked foreign players, with 10 on the books as it stands. And allegedly, although clubs been linked all summer, no bids. And then this morning and today, it sort of was revealed that Rubin are going in for another winger, Anders Dreyer from Midtjylland, for €7 million. So that's a hefty fee after we'd already spent a similar amount on Haksabanovic. And in my head, as soon as I saw it, I thought, okay, well that's Kavica gone. He's surely can't stay. On paper, it looks like actually having caught a bit of Dreyer's highlights, and I was watching some some clips of Drea beforehand, before he came on. He actually is more of a Makarov replacement by the left-footed, playing off the right, and seems to love a shot from wherever, which is very Makarov-esque. The first clip I saw of him was him doing 3 feints before scoring. It was like almost a carbon copy of the goal that Makarov scored against Zenit. But even so, that leaves Rubin with too many foreigners and an extra foreign winger. I just thought, okay, surely he's on the move. Vladislav Zimagulov, formerly of Sports Business Online, I think he's with Sport Express now. He posted on Telegram that Rubin would be trying to part way with Saito, Jevtic and Begic, and that as of today, Rubin had yet to receive a concrete offer for Krasnodar, and that they currently don't envisage him leaving. So that would leave Rubin with 3 very talented attacking midfielders. It's a shame to see Saito go, but I think the talk is that they'll pick him up permanently and loan him out with the anticipation of the limit changing next season. Begic will be replaced by Talbi. Then Jevtic is a bit of a loss, admittedly. Not the best player, but can pull Rubin out of sticky situations like he did in midweek with a good goal against Khimki. And with him and Saito going, it just leaves us maybe a man short in midfield would be my position unless a Russian player comes in. So who knows? Still a week left. Obviously, Creech has been linked to plenty of clubs. That information from Zimagulov may be dated or incorrect. My heart still says that he probably will go. I think, the whole situation seems to be geared up that Rubin are preparing for him to go by spending another big fee on Andrea, who, as we've seems to be a sort of first team ready player, but it's still a bit up in the air as to where he might go. He's been linked to plenty of clubs. The Milan interest seems to have cooled. Spurs interest, they seem to be veering towards Adama Traore. So there's no real team in the lead when it comes to that link at the moment. And we may well see him in Russia for the rest of the season as it stands. But I wouldn't be surprised if we also don't. I think there's a lot to play for still in this last week of the window.
Yeah, it's another one where obviously linked to very big moves throughout the entirety of the summer, a lot of which coming from both the Georgian press and Moscow-based press, as you would expect, but also moving over from Italy within the Damasio and Fabrizio Romano camp, and they do seem to be more accurate, if that's a correct word, or closer on some speculation. The transfers have a lot of sources throughout Europe, so there's definitely the interest there. I mean, as you said, he's the remaining RPL contender in for the Golden Boy Award, so there's obviously people looking for him. And to be honest, I hope it's done sooner rather than later, to allow him to have that time to acclimatise, to allow him to have more time from the potential team and fans that he would arrive at, because if you're younger, then people naturally give you more leeway. So hopefully sooner rather than later, and he doesn't leave it too late, like one Alexander Kokorin did, where it was like 10 years in a prison sentence later. Richard, do you think Vlasic will be off, or will he continue his career at CSKA?
Well, we've seen in the last couple of days, haven't we, that there's been reportedly a bid from West Ham for Vlasic. I heard the figure was around 30 million euros. I mean, I've got to admit, I find that fee difficult to believe. I'm not surprised that there is a bid in for him, but 30 million is quite steep, especially, don't get me wrong, he's got a high reputation, but I was wondering, would perhaps him having been to the Premier League before with Everton and then being loaned out to CSKA before joining them permanently, would that maybe have dissuaded clubs from putting in a large fee? A large bid. That's what I was thinking when that rumour broke. But yeah, West Ham are the team at the minute that seem to be in for Vlasic, if you believe the rumours. it's again, I think it's a bit like Kvicha. It'd be interesting to see the next couple of days what does happen. And again, I think anything could literally happen at this point. He could still stay, or there's still 5-6 days of the window to go yet. I still won't rule out an exit. West Ham is an interesting move for him, I think. They've got European football this season, so they will need a deeper squad. But the fee for it did seem quite steep. I mean, I'm definitely not saying for 1 minute that Premier League clubs could not afford him, but 30 million, given that they seem to be the ones spending the most money in the market at the minute, even despite COVID hitting it. But yeah, 30 million did seem a bit steep, so I'm not sure whether those fees are that reported fee is accurate or not, but I can certainly see interest in him in the next few days. I've noticed actually as well that in the last few days around Europe, the market has picked up a little bit now, so maybe it was a case of a lot of clubs waiting and seeing what they had, waiting for the season to start, seeing what they had before then making their move, or maybe it was a case of one transfer goes through, which kickstarts the domino effect. So the market has picked up a little bit overall the last couple of days. So, it'd be interesting to see. But West Ham are the team at the minute who've reportedly made a bid. What happens with Milan, I don't know. I mean, Milan, there's been rumours about them coming in for both Kvicha and Vlasic. I thought have a net negative spend of, I think they got a net negative spend of around 50-60 million euros at the minute, Milan. So I thought them being in for both was unrealistic. It was going to be either one of Vlasic or Kvicha. At the minute, obviously, I think at the moment, Vlasic to Milan probably is more realistic than Kvicha, but we'll just have to wait and see. If 30 million might be a stretch for clubs, I have a feeling if they are going to get a sale here, CSKA, if that reported figure is what clubs have bid, they might have to lower their price. So I'm just finding that I'm not surprised he's being linked with clubs, but I'm finding that 30 million euro asking price perhaps a bit unrealistic. But we'll have to wait and see. Like I said, the next 5-6 days, I suspect there'll be some late deals this window.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. I think it's been a lot of managers and sporting directors have actually commented on this earlier in the window, discussing how, particularly early on, it was quite a stagnant one, because of the delay of the Olympics and the Euros. You had both of them this summer. So that would cause the bigger teams whose players are away to wait and see until the players, what fit and fatigue levels the players were in when they would return. Obviously, most of the big leagues have had some form of protracted transfer, like the Grealish, Sancho, Lukaku, Messi, all of those big ones across the various different leagues have kind of fallen into place now, and you'll see the domino effect of the smaller clubs, and then further down spending less and less as it goes along. And then replacing them with players from the lower leagues and such. So it has been stagnant, but it seemed like hopefully in the last week or so it is certainly picking up. And to move on to the last player that we'll focus on is one who have picked up. Finally, a replacement for Grzegorz Krakowiak, who went to Krasnodar, and that's Lokomotiv, who've signed Alexis Becker. So, David, this is actually an RFN exclusive, but what would you expect from the young Frenchman in the RPL?
Yeah, it was. We broke the story, I think a day before RMC picked up in France. He was obviously heavily linked to Nice, and as the story goes, Ralph Rangnick went across to France and persuaded Becker to come to Lokomotiv, and he was then present at their match over the weekend and was announced as a signing on the Monday, I think. I must admit, I did not know anything about him before the rumours. He went to the Olympics with the French team, so that it gives you a sort of an idea of where he stands in terms of ability. It was a weak team that they sent, considering that a lot of the young French players are in the senior team. But he played a full season with Caen in Ligue 1 last year. And, Ligue 2. I think they've just been promoted. Actually, as a lie, they've not been promoted. But he played a full season. It was his first senior season. 7 million is the fee that they've paid. And it'll be interesting to see, whether he can adapt straight in. I think Kamano will be a big help in helping Becca to adapt. Obviously, they'll share the language. They both speak French and they both come from the French leagues, so that will be a big help in his adaptation. It seems like he's going to be ready for the first team though straight away. Whether he's a similar player, he looks quite slight. I've not seen any footage of him playing at all, so I have actually no idea what sort of style of player he is on the field. But you'd have to hope. Granted, Loko are doing fairly well, and they've got some good depth in there for the midfield. But Krychowiak was that sort of link, wasn't he, between the defence and attack? And with guys like Kulikov, Mikheyev, and Baranov, they're all the deep midfielders. Anton Moranchuk's been played with a hip injury all year, which is why he's not been featuring. That was the story that broke this week. So Becker and another link, Tino Anjorin of Chelsea, seemingly the two players who they're looking to bring in to fill the Krychowiak gap, essentially.
So we'll quickly just finish off with one last player. David, you've been following the story of Matthias Norman for quite some time now. What's your understanding of the latest developments in his long protracted, hopeful move away from Rostov?
So from our perspective, RFN, we believe that the player is fairly desperate to leave the club. He wants to go. The club don't want him to go, particularly now that the manager's changed. They were still sort of semi-keen on him going beforehand. But since they changed manager to Siomin, they don't want to let him go, obviously, because he is a key player and they want him to be as part of the build under Siomin. But Norman is fairly desperate to leave and has been so for apparently quite some time. He has obviously suffered with injuries a lot over the last year, but is back in the first team and as actually was very good this weekend against Nizhny Novgorod. The story goes that Norwich made a bid. It was a loan offer, 2 million fee up front with a obligation to purchase for 14 million. These are euros, these fees, if they aren't relegated. Neither the player nor Rostov were happy with that. Rostov want a guaranteed fee, whether they're relegated or not, and Norman doesn't want to be locked into a team that may get relegated. So that one seems to be sort of a dead end, unless they can come up with some sort of compromise. The other team who is rumoured to be sort of showing some interest is Newcastle, but the signing of Joe Willock maybe has put paid to that. Obviously, we know Norman's a bit of a box-to-box player, a bit like Willock is. So that one maybe is at a dead end also. But the player wants to leave desperately. The club don't particularly want him to leave. It just needs a team to come in with a suitable offer. A loan with an obligation to buy, or a straight up full transfer, and that one will almost certainly happen if a team can meet that offer. He'll be offered the first opportunity. But yeah, that's the latest certainly on the Norman situation.
Might be a little bit selfish, but I hope from my point of view that Willock signing for Newcastle is certainly a sign that Norman will not be moving there, because I really enjoy watching him play. I think he's a really talented player who could definitely make the step up, and being linked with Premier League clubs is not necessarily surprising, although I don't think he would hit the ground running immediately. With any luck, he won't hit the ground running at all there, just to make them as bad as possible. But anyway, we'll move on to the last of the three topics, and that's just a quick little recap of some of the latest RPL action. And as I did mention, Dynamo Moscow are now top of the RPL table. And Richard, you caught their game against Ural at the weekend, and you've of course kept a closer eye on Dynamo for quite a few years now. What do you think of them this season?
Yeah, they're certainly much upgraded and improved from last season. You can tell now. I think it's coming up to almost a year now since Sandro Schwartz took charge. I'd imagine now, probably it was around October last year. So you're coming up to around a year now in charge, and once a manager's been in charge for that long, so you're looking at 25 games in charge, 25 to 30 games in charge, you start to see how they're imposing their tactics, their style on the team, and it definitely looks like now Schwartz has imposed it. Integration of young players, quick passing moves. They're certainly creating a lot of chances. They absolutely battered Ural at the weekend. Admittedly, Eric Bitfalvi's early red card in the first half played an impact on the result. Played an impact on the way the game played out, because Ural didn't have a single shot at all during the game. I don't think they would have beaten or drawn with Dynamo anyway if Bitfalvi had stayed on the pitch, because they were totally dominant even before the red card. Dynamo were totally dominant. But yeah, it was just a total mismatch against Ural. The 1-0, just to get away with a 1-0 defeat, I think flattered Ural a lot. Dynamo could have had more. Thought the Ural's goalkeeper played a blinder. He made a couple of good saves from Karpin, who took his goal really well. Another assist from Arsene Zakarian. And Karpin was actually very unlucky not to score early in the second half. Karpin put a beautiful ball through, which sliced open the Ural defence. Karpin went onto it. He put it past the keeper, but then Adamov, the Ural defender, just hacked it off the line. I think Dynamo hit the post or bar, the woodwork. Yeah, they hit the post bar, I think 2 or 3 times in the second half as well, from what I recall of the game. Just a very, comfortable victory. Probably the only thing you could say really is they probably need to be a bit more clinical, take a few more chances. But if they still keep creating those amount of chances, then they will eventually have a field day against someone, you would think. That's probably the only thing I would say at the minute. Just be a bit more clinical up front, take the chances. Makarov came close with a volley from just outside the box. Yeah, I think Dynamo are coming along really, really nicely. This is a good test at the weekend against Lokomotiv. You can tell, like when I first read about Sandro Schwartz coming to Russian football, I think I read a piece on Total Football Analysis from his time at Mainz, and they mentioned one thing was overloading the centre. And I've definitely noticed that with some of their attacking plays. They play a 4-3-2-1 system, a narrow attack system in the middle where it's very much dependent on to break through the lines, quick transition, quick passing, quick combination play, overloading the centre and playing in tight spaces. And you can tell it's having an impact now on the team. They look fully integrated into what the coach's philosophy is, what his tactics are. And yeah, this weekend's game against Lokomotiv is a good test. It's I'm really looking forward to it. It's probably the game of the week. And yeah, they can. It's at home, so Dynamo can win that, and yeah, go into the international break top of the league is quite a statement. They're certainly looking good for a top 5 finish and possibly European football next season. I think it's important to keep expectations in check, not get too carried away. But yeah, they're coming along nicely, Dynamo at the moment, I think.
Yeah, hard to disagree with much of that. I think not only is the football effective, aside from the Akhmat game, where Akhmat, to be fair, but I thought absolutely outstanding, probably the best I've seen them play under Talalayev. I think they played among the most attractive football in the league. To quickly stay with yourself, Richard, and stay in Moscow, you also kept an eye on CSKA's match at the weekend as well.
Yeah, against Akhmat. Again, I think the game was conditioned as well by a red card early on. I think it was Harin, who got sent off for Akhmat, if my mind serves me correctly. It took CSKA a while to break them down. I say you can tell they're a well-coached side under Talalayev of Akhmat, a coach who I do like in the RPL. But yeah, they got the win. It was nice to see the youngster Yakovlev, the young striker, score. And speaking of another transfer away from the RPL, I have heard Adolfo Geist earlier today. It broke that he's been linked with a move to Feyenoord. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if that does go through, or whether it's Feyenoord who bid for him, whether Geist does leave before deadline day, because I found it quite interesting that he was one of 3 strikers on the bench, Gaish, and, I think it was Zabolotny and Yakovlev got on ahead of him, and CSKA bringing a young youth academy product onto the pitch ahead of you, then that's a pretty damn strong sign that even though you're registered, you're probably going to be on your way soon, because if CSKA are going to play a one-man striker formation under Berezutskiy, they don't need 4 strikers. So, I think Gaish probably might be on his way, but it was good to see the young kid Yakovlev score. It was a good ball that Chalov, floated the ball across the box to him, and he was there to nod home. And again, the star man of the show for CSKA again was Chidera Ejuke. It was a brilliant goal, brilliant second goal that he scored for CSKA. Just a classic Robin-esque, like cut in from the wing and then hammered it into the bottom corner. And he's really developing now, I think, into CSKA's main man. I think when Vlasic leaves, he's going to take the reins and become the main threat for them in attack. I love the way he can play good combination passes in tight spaces in the centre. He's got that ability to cut inside in that inside forward role. You can see the decision-making ability of Ejuke has improved a lot this season, which it will take a little bit of time with young players. I think people have got to remember that as well. When he came in last season, there was inconsistencies, but the talent was there, and I think this time round, over time, players improve and they get more consistent, they get better with their actions. I mean, I watch a lot of La Liga, and Vinicius Junior is like that at Real Madrid at the moment. He's gradually progressing every year. The inconsistency with decision making gradually gets reduced, and I'm seeing similarities with Ejuke this season, and I think he's going to be the main man for CSKA when Vlasic departs. But I think they've steadied the ship a little bit now under Berezutskiy. This is the real test at the weekend against Zenit, but Zenit haven't been playing particularly well recently, so CSKA might give them a good run for their money this weekend. That's probably the other game that I'm really looking forward to seeing. So some stability from Berezutskiy, but this weekend is the real acid test. But yeah, it was a good win. It was a good win for them.
Yeah, really good win. The CSKA genuinely this season absolutely baffle me. They play really, really nice football. Obviously, would have been undone by defensive mistakes. I think it was Biol himself who gave away a penalty in the Dynamo game, which Daniil Fomin, as always, duly dispatched. Naya Teknizian was torn apart by Rifat in the other Moscow derby. They lost against Loko at home. So it's not perfect. It is far from perfect, actually, but the quality of CSKA's play and the entertainment value of CSKA's play is probably the best it's been since Koncharenko was in his pomp. But if you just take, say, the weekend side, the tore Akhmat apart. Akhmat were pretty poor. But if you look at it, you've got Vlasic playing largely out of position, more so on the right-hand side. Xhaka Biol out of position, playing central defence, having played the entirety of the spine of the team for CSKA, from defence to striker. And Ivan Obliakov playing at left-back, also slightly out of position. In theory, it shouldn't really work. Chalov, you would think, would be bullied up top, especially against Akhmat's 3 giant defenders in Nizic, Putska and Semyonov. But it just works really well. And I think a lot of that really is down to just how good Fernandez and Ejuke have been this season. But also Igor Deveev and Xhaka Biol. Biol's quality in progressing the ball out from the back is really, really good, and not particularly surprising considering he has played in far more attacking positions. But fair credit to Berezutskiy because he's organising them defensively. Deveev was excellent again at the weekend. I think he was statistically one of the highest rated players in the entire game. Won 100% of his aerial duels as well, and like I say, against a big Akhmat team. I mean, that's aside from the 3 centre defenders who are well over 6'2", 6'3", there's also Mohamed Kanate up top, who's no slouch himself. So to win 100% of the aerial duels in that just shows why Deveev performed for the national team in the Euros, was one of the few to come out with credit, and has been linked with moves to higher clubs in Europe. So a little bit baffled by it, but absolutely fair enough to them. David, you caught Ufa in their impressive result at Zenit at the weekend as well.
Yeah, they've had a decent start under under Stukalov this season. After their struggles last year, Stukalov was what turned it around for them, and he saved them. And another good result this weekend against Zenit. First half wasn't great. They conceded. It was a poor goal to concede, and it was Azir Ali who was playing left wing back, completely just ignored Malcolm. He had a glance over his shoulder, saw him, and then that was it. Malcolm suddenly ran in onto a very good long ball over the top. But it was literally Berezutskiy, ball over the top from the centre circle. Malcolm controls it inside the penalty area with no one around him and just slots it home. And Zenit could have scored more in the first half, but then the second half, Ufa were, until they scored, which they scored in the 74th minute, were the dominant team. And for the sort of maybe 5 minutes after that as well, they looked like they were going to go and ride that momentum. And then Zenit had a go for the last 10 minutes when Ufa sort of decided we should play for the draw here. But they couldn't break through. Obviously, Belanov made a big save from Claudinho. The goal they scored was a little bit lucky. It was a rare mistake from Wilmar Barrios, actually. Gave the ball away in defence. And then easy pass across, and Agalarov, unmarked in the box, just had essentially an empty net to tap into. But that's what Ufa are there for. They take those chances when they get them normally, and they can grind out those results, and we know it. Also great to see Oston Arunov was back. He's obviously joined them again on loan, and oh my word, they had an insane counter-attack to go and take the lead not long after they scored it, which was spurred on by Arunov. Zenit had a free kick on the edge of the Ufa box, cleared away. Arunov takes it away, nutmegs a Zenit player, and then is suddenly Ufa have a 3-on-1 or 3-on-2 at a push. And it's a combination of Arunov's ball is about a yard over here, and Agalarov just delays his run slightly. He turns around to watch Arunov to make sure the ball's coming. If he just gets his head down and runs, he had no threat of being offside because Douglas Santos is in front of him at this point. But Douglas is in the middle because there's a man bombing down the right wing as well. If Agalarov carries on his run as he did without slowing up, which is what he did, he slowed up and looked around to make sure the ball was coming to him, then he gets to that ball in time to score easily. But because he's delayed his run and because therefore the pass was a touch over here, Kurzhikov gets there just to smother the ball at his feet. But it was a huge chance, and just shows the difference, between a top player and a player like Agalarov, obviously, who is just a good young player in a third tier league, second or third tier league. But hopefully he'll learn from that, and it just shows that Zenit are not impervious to defeat. They've not been overly impressive, certainly in defence this season. I think they've conceded multiple goals in almost every. I think they may have kept one clean sheet so far. And a very good result from the youth perspective. I was very pleased for them. Obviously, I've always had a soft spot, and they're going good guns at the moment.
I'll just quickly keep on Kamil Agalarov because I think his form has taken quite a few by surprise this season. For those who maybe do not know as much about him, he's only 21. Obviously, he's a member of the Anji Academy, born in Magachkala in Dagestan. He moved to Ufa in 2020 and spent, was it half of last year? Was it again, David? It was from January on loan at Volga.
Yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in all your Finnatel scouting pieces that we published last year, Agalarov didn't actually appear in any of them. So are you surprised and a little bit taken aback by his quick start?
Well, I mean, obviously, you followed Agalarov. We first wrote about him when he was 17, but what I thought was going to happen with Agalarov and Idris Yumayev is the other player who I thought this was going to happen with. Both of those guys are both 21, 22, and both had good second half of the season on loan in the Feniel. Agalarov scored 5 or 6 goals in 12 appearances for Volga. and Umayev scored a similar amount for Chaika. And I just thought, okay, both these guys, Agalarov especially, will still count as a Limichik. So he could go to, like, a Fenio club would surely want him, and I'm sure there were clubs interested. But I thought, a Fenio club will want him. He's a Limichik. He's got proven record now on the Fenio. He will do a very good job for any team there as a striker. But obviously he did enough to impress Stukalov. We know what Stukalov's like. He had a young squad at Velez. He's taken that on. He's got a young squad now at Ufa, and he's given him the chance. And yeah, we're very pleased for him. He's received his first under-21 call-up as well. So yeah, a little bit surprising, but he's obviously put in the work, and we've seen his pedigree at youth level of being a goal scorer. He's now showing it. He's four goals in, second top scorer in the league. So all credit to him.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, it's great to see a surprise come in like that, and hopefully he can keep it up, and it isn't just a little bit of a adrenaline fueled flash in the pan, because he has, like you said, shown some real flashes of quality, if potentially naive at other times as well. But David, to return straight back to yourself, you also kept an eye on Krasnodar's game at the weekend, and I think you want to reserve some particular praise for Jan Cordoba.
Yeah, Krasnodar. There's praise and there's definitely criticism to be lumped at them here. They conceded 2 awful goals to concede. If you've conceded within the first 7 minutes a counter attack, which I think the first goal was a 4-on-3 counter attack, which Lokomotiv had. That's not ideal. That's not how you want to start a game. But that's how Krasnodar are playing. Their wing backs get up high. They started with a defensive duo of Chernikov and Sorokin, who are both ball players. Sorokin's a ball playing centre half. Chernikov is a midfielder by nature. So both of those like to get a bit higher up and like to play with the ball. The wing backs, we know, love to get forward, Petrov and Ramirez, and it just left them overly exposed, and Lokomotiv took very good advantage of that. The second goal was just absolutely horrendous defending from Krasnodar. When Sorokin lost the ball, I took a screenshot and tweeted it of the moment when Sorokin lost the ball for the second goal. So he's about 15 yards inside the opposition half, and he's got an option out to his left, which, if he takes the pass early, he's got, but he dallies because he wants to play a more progressive pass, and that option then disappears. So he's then forced to try this risky pass into Gabella, which he plays attached short. The defender gets in, and Loko suddenly have a 3-on-1, and this is only half an hour into the game. They suddenly have a 3-on-1 counter because Chernikov's the only other guy back who was on about the halfway line. Sorokin dives in to try and stop it, is then out of the game because he misses the tackle. Chernikov then dives in and also misses the tackle, leaving Smolov with essentially a tap-in, which he duly took. So, yeah, more defensive nightmares for Krasnodar. Goncharenko then resorted to bringing on Kayo at half-time. Imagine having defensive problems and then bringing on Kayo. And he didn't even replace the two who were on the pitch already. Sorokin stayed on for the rest of the game. I think he took off Yonov and moved Chernikov into midfield. Now, granted, they didn't concede in the second half, and Kayo was actually fairly good. And they gave it a good go. They had the chances to make this game level. Loko backed off. Krasnodar had a lot of the ball. They had a lot more shots. John Cordoba, as you said, I want to put a lot of praise on him. He's clearly a very, very good striker, and he will carry on scoring a lot of goals this season. I have no doubt about it, unless he gets injured. His strength, his general hold-up play, his general just striker play. He's just got it. He is just a very good striker, particularly for this level. And he scored a very good goal again. He had other moments where you couldn't believe how he was still in control of the ball. He's really capable of competing physically with the defenders in the RPL and against the small teams. When Krasnodar get themselves together, I have no doubt that he'll be able to score buckets. He could have had a couple last week against Ural that hit the bar with his penalty. Sorry, and very good signing I think we did touch on it last week, but very good signing, and he showed it again this week. But ultimately, that team is going to carry on struggling unless they can sort out the defence, and they can't sort out their defence until they sort out their foreigners. There's talk that Klaassen may go. Vilhena wasn't in the squad. He wants to leave, and there's rumours that he maybe could go to Sampdoria. If that spot opens up, they've got to go and get a foreign player. Obviously, Spajic not playing at the moment. I presume just injured, but it'd be good if they can get him back as well. But they need to get Spajic in and get someone to play ahead of both Sorokin and Kayo. Sorokin and Kayo need to be the backups at best. And then if the spot for the foreign is opening up, which it looks like it might do with Vilhena, that's what they need to do. But there's promising signs there, but there's too many problems there to make it too optimistic for them this season.
I'm not particularly sure if Vilhena would be that massive of a miss. Obviously, he had pedigree.
Yeah.
He's performed better this year, but I just don't think he's ever really fit into Krasnodar's game. In Krakowiak, you've got a similar sort of ready-made replacement. All I can really remember from Vilhena doing was slowing down the game too much because he doesn't quite have the technical ball-playing ability of some of the other midfielders in the Krasnodar side, and then taking long pot shots. So you might as well get someone who's better at that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and they had his one good game out of him in the first game in the season where he scored 2 pot shots against Ural while playing at left back. That's where he'd started the season, playing at left back. But now Ramirez is fit again, and Petrov is fit again, so now they don't need him at left back. So yeah, I don't particularly rate him. I think they can do better with that foreigner spot, and the defense needs addressing. So if they can ship him out for a decent fee, and allegedly the player wants to go, then get it done and get a replacement in.
I think that's often why we are so harsh on players like Kayo and Vilhena, speaking of Krasnodar, is because of the foreign element that were mentioned and discussed at the start of the pod.
Yep.
If it wasn't because these positions were such a premium in these squads, without treating the lower league teams unfairly, the teams lower in the league, it is even more of a premium at those who have been in the Champions League and Europa League of late because of the self-created disadvantage they're always going to be at. So you really don't want someone who's mistake-prone or passenger in games to be taking up a crucial spot for a foreigner in the composition of the squad.
Just as a lead on then, so I was posed a question during the week by Hanu, who is the worst foreigner in the league? It took me a little while, and I came up with Yanchu from Akhmat and maybe Rodakovic from Arsenal Tula. But I must admit, I did not consider Kayo. I'd sort of forgotten about him. In terms of worst foreigner in the league, ability-wise, probably not. But worst foreigner in relation to the team that he's in and how important he has to be for that team, who, he's not good enough for a European quality team. Stick him in an Ural, he'd probably be great. And you'd think he's a great foreigner. But actually, in a team like Krasnodar, who need reliability and better players, he's not good enough. But I just was keen to maybe get your who's the worst foreigner in the league opinion. I know it's a bit
personally,
on the spot.
I would have to say Bruno Fuchs. While in the same breath, I don't believe he is by far the single worst foreigner in the league in terms of a pure ability alone, but the money that he costs, the position that he takes up, and the ratio of cost to minutes on the pitch. I think he's played, less than 90 minutes since his arrival at CSKA.
Okay.
I mean, you could even rival that with the other Argentinian Gaich at CSKA.
But on pure ability, then let's go pure ability, because
God,
I mean we don't know enough on Fuchs. I think he's still only played that first 18 minutes that he got last year. I don't think he's played it since. But on pure ability,
it would be unfair to probably put him in too much of too much impetus upon him and too much blame upon him for that. But pure ability is probably someone I would think, someone like Nemanja Miletic. It's Ufa. Every time I see him, he's just absolutely hopeless. And I look at him and I think, why are Ufa bringing this guy in? I think the last time I saw him was in the Dynamo game. Every single goal came from down his side. For me and Szymanski absolutely slaughtered him. And I'm just to be fair, Zakarian wasn't very good that game, but it was Szymanski in particular who absolutely slaughtered him. He hasn't played since. I think he's been on the bench since then for Ufa. Maybe that's a little bit harsh, but probably yeah, Miletic or I mean Kai. I have to go Kaio, don't I? After some of the way that I've treated him last season and the pressure he's been put under, and just the sheer gravitas of the mistakes and how often the mistakes come from him. Richard, who would you think, it may be pure ability alone or other external factors, as the worst foreigner?
Yeah, some good shouts there from you guys. I probably have to agree with some of those. Yeah, and Kaio, yeah, I think, regrettably, I'll say a guy who was signed as a defensive midfielder and then rocks up as a central defender. And then just, yeah, really mistake prone. And I totally agree with what you were saying. And yeah, some of the other ones that you mentioned too, I certainly agree with as well. And just, yeah, I think like what David said, I think we've mentioned it on previous pods, we really are now starting with the limit to question the presence now, question all the overseas players in the league now because of the limit. Because are you getting best value for the spot? Because they are valuable spots for foreign players, given we have a strict limit in the league. And yeah, you have to say it's a bit on the clubs really that they probably could have maybe scouted a bit better. I mean, obviously every transfer you make is a gamble and a risk. You don't know. Some players might have a good reputation before they sign and they just flop. They might not settle. But yeah, you do really question, don't you, the value of players when you have a foreign limit in place. And I think, going off what we've just discussed there, I think that's why, going back briefly to the last thing before we go, I think the foreign limit has to go up to 12 minimum. I don't think 10 will make enough of a difference. I think we'll still be having the same questions. At least with 12, then you could have backup foreign players on the bench in case there is a drastic shortage of talent where, you know, you're buying in the local Russian market. So yeah, I think 10 is not enough. I think it has to go up to 12 if we're going to rid ourselves of this, you know, questioning the foreign players with regards to, you know, how valuable they are, because obviously when you work under a strict limit, that kind of thing. So I thought I'd just bring that in. But yeah, I think Kaio definitely has to be up there.
Actually, I totally forgot. It's not just this team don't have the single worst foreigner, but they've arguably got all three of the three worst Legionnaires, and it's a team. Sorry, Andrew Flint, who haven't won in 5 games now. I don't think they've won at all this season. Dead bottom, absolutely dreadful, and it's their entire midfield from the loss against Dynamo at the weekend. Branko Jovicic, Daniel Miskic, and Eric Bikfalvi. Eric Bikfalvi has done absolutely nothing for about 2.5 years now. And I don't think I've ever seen Ural win with a midfield combination of Miskic and Jovicic. They're just one of those midfielders, or both of them are exactly the same, where they try to both be box to box and end up becoming passengers in the game.
That's who Hanno suggested. He said, I think his answer was one of those random Balkan Serbian midfielders from Ural. He didn't name an actual player, but they've got so many of them.
There was that Swiss winger they had too, wasn't there? Was it Aratore? I think he was pretty down as well, wasn't he? Yeah, they've had a few recently, Ural, I think.
Ural just seem to have bad luck when it comes to foreigners. This is probably why they're against the limit. They've yet to have one who's really done all that well for them. Like, I think the last good foreigners they had were probably Fontanello,
El Kabir,
and Azevedo. El Kabir was okay, but he was like, you know, he was so inconsistent. But he was he's a relative success story in terms of foreign players in Ural. You know, we think back to maybe Chizan Balungu as well, but I remember Fontanello was very good, and so was Gerson Azevedo for a couple of years. But in recent years, they've just had a who's who of nobodies of foreign players in Yekaterinburg, essentially. I mean, okay, we'll give him Eric Falvey as well. Let's give it to him. You know, for a couple of years, he was carrying that team. He was that team. But yeah, their foreigner success stories are not few and far between over in Siberia there.
Who was the Portuguese or Brazilian winger at Dynamo? not long ago. Was it
Miguel Cardozo?
Cardozo.
Cardozo, yeah, nothing special. No.
Scored the first goal of the season, I remember. Maybe last season, was it? I
think it might have been, yeah.
I remember it was away at Ufa. Oh no,
he's
just Arsenal.
He's just another one of those midfielders who are just complete and absolute trash and bring absolutely nothing to the game. You know, like only in Russia purely. Like, the irony is, in a country with a foreigner limit, they're in Russia because they are foreign, because they are not particularly scouted effectively enough. And I think Dynamo have had absolutely loads of them over the years as well. That's such like a ridiculous. Like, I remember when I had William Van Quer and like Leandro Fernandez and Matteo Valbuena all in the same team at the same time.
Kevin Karani, brilliant player.
Yeah, but to be fair, Karani was actually brought something to it. He was a little bit late in the game, but like the most Dynamo is all right. The most Dynamo signing ever is Maximilian Philipp.
Yeah.
That was not good.
Even Sylvester Boone is just a real panic buy. He doesn't suit their system. Yeah,
he was one of those guys. It was a bit like when Zenit signed Johan Molo. It was like, well, he's done good for that team in Russia, so he must be good for our team too.
Yeah, he was good at Ufa, but just didn't suit Dynamo.
Oh, he was incredible for Ufa. Yeah, he was the perfect player for that Ufa style. Yeah.
I think I got the wrong Fernandez. I think Leandro Fernandez is actually potentially a club legend. So, Dynamo Ultras, please don't.
I thought Valbuena was really good for that year he was there too. I remember he scored a few belters.
He was really good, but he was like one of the main reasons as to why they were relegated and kicked out of the fined in FIFA Fair Play.
Would have been absolutely enormous.
He was on like 140 grand a week at the time, which is unreal in 2015. So. But yeah, in terms of ability, fair enough. He's too good. But we were going to discuss Krylia's first win, but that was a more interesting topic. So Krylia won everyone that finally didn't lose. And that's the end of this week's episode. We may or may not be around for the international break due to some various vacations. I'll personally be spending some time north of the border in jolly old Scotland, but we will try and record potentially ahead of time with another mailbag if we can. Don't hold us on that yet, scheduling to be confirmed, but until then, this has been the RFN podcast. Goodbye for now.
Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Веди его, беги, точнее его ударь. Но мяч берет ноги решительный вратарь. Не напрасно футбольное поле самых ловких и смелых влечет. Здесь нужны тренировка и воля, быстрота, увлечение, расчет.